The music stopped. 38,000 people watched as Tupac Shakur gestured toward a young man standing in the VIP section, motioning for him to come onto the stage. And when Curtis 50 Cent Jackson walked into the spotlight and began telling the story behind his 9 bullet wounds, what he revealed about who pulled the trigger would send shockwaves through the hip-hop world and change everything anyone thought they knew about loyalty, betrayal, and survival. It was July 27, 1996, at the Oakland Coliseum. Tupac was performing one of his biggest shows of the year, but sitting in the VIP section was a 21-year-old rapper from Queens who had been quietly building a reputation on the New York underground scene. Curtis Jackson, who performed under the name 50 Cent, had driven cross-country with his crew specifically to see Tupac perform, hoping to network and learn from the West Coast legend. What none of the 38,000 people in attendance knew was that 50 Cent was carrying scars from a shooting that had happened just 3 months earlier, bullet wounds that had nearly ended his life and definitely ended his trust in everyone around him. The story of those 9 bullets was a secret he had shared with only his closest friends, but tonight, under the bright lights of Tupac's stage, everything was about to change. The evening had started as pure West Coast celebration. Tupac was electric, the crowd was worshipping every word, and Death Row Records was at the absolute peak of its power. During a brief break between songs, Tupac had been scanning the VIP section when he noticed the young man from New York, who had been watching every move with the intensity of someone studying for an exam. Hold up, Tupac said into the microphone, pointing directly at 50 Cent. I see you over there, young brother. You got that look in your eyes like you got something to say. The crowd turned to see who Tupac was addressing, and 50 Cent found himself in the spotlight of 38,000 pairs of eyes. Come up here, Tupac called out. Let these people meet you. 50 Cent hesitated. He had come to the concert to observe, not to participate. But when Tupac Shakur invited you onto his stage, you didn't say no. As 50 Cent made his way through the VIP section and up onto the stage, Tupac could see something in the young man's eyes that reminded him of his own early hunger and determination. What's your name, young brother? Tupac asked, handing him the microphone. Curtis Jackson, 50 replied, his voice carrying clearly through the massive venue. But people call me 50 Cent. 50 Cent, Tupac repeated, nodding with approval. I like that. And where you from, 50? Queens, New York, 50 answered, and the crowd reacted with a mixture of cheers and boos, reflecting the ongoing East Coast-West Coast tensions. Tupac held up his hand to quiet the audience. Nah, none of that. This young man traveled 3,000 miles to be here tonight. That shows respect, and we're going to show respect back. The crowd settled down, understanding that Tupac was taking control of the moment. So tell me, 50, Tupac continued. What brings you all the way to Oakland? 50 Cent looked out at the massive crowd, then back at Tupac. This was his moment, his chance to make an impression on one of the most influential figures in hip-hop. I came here to learn, he said simply, to understand what it means to be real in this game. Tupac nodded, recognizing the sincerity in the young man's voice. Real, Tupac repeated. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. What does real mean to you? 50 Cent paused, looking down at his hands, then back up at Tupac and the crowd. Real means surviving when people you trust try to kill you, he said, and his words created a silence that seemed to swallow the entire stadium. Tupac's expression changed immediately. He recognized the weight in those words, the pain behind them. What are you talking about, young brother? Tupac asked, his voice softer now, more personal. What happened next would become one of the most powerful moments in hip-hop history. 50 Cent began telling the story of May 24, 1996, the day that had changed his life forever. 3 months ago, I was sitting in my grandmother's car outside her house in Queens, he began, his voice steady, but carrying emotion that was unmistakable. I was waiting for her to come outside, so I could drive her to the store. The crowd was completely silent, understanding that they were about to hear something deeply personal and potentially dangerous. A car pulled up next to us, 50 continued. I thought it was someone I knew, so I rolled down my window. That's when I saw the gun. Tupac's face showed a mixture of respect and concern. He understood that 50 was sharing something that most people in that situation would take to their graves. They shot me 9 times, 50 said, and the crowd gasped audibly. Hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, left cheek. I should have died that day. But you didn't, Tupac said, and his voice carried the understanding of someone who had faced similar violence. No, I didn't, 50 agreed. But the worst part wasn't the bullets. The worst part was finding out who ordered the hit. The stadium went completely silent. 38,000 people were holding their breath. "Who was it?" Tupac asked, though his expression suggested he might already suspect the answer. 50 Cent looked directly at Tupac, then out at the crowd. "It was someone I considered family," he said. "Someone I had been making money with for years, someone who was supposed to have my back." The pain in his voice was evident to everyone listening. "His name is Kenneth Supreme McGriff," 50 continued. "And he ordered me killed because I was becoming too successful, too independent. He wanted to control my career, and when I refused, he decided to end it permanently." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. This wasn't just a story about random street violence. This was about betrayal at the highest levels, about family turning on family for money and power. But what 50 said next would prove to be even more shocking. "The shooter was my own cousin," he whispered into the microphone, and the words hit the crowd like a physical blow. "My cousin Marcus took money to kill me. Family blood for drug money." Tupac's reaction was immediate and visible. This level of betrayal, this depth of family treachery, was something that even he found difficult to process. "How do you survive something like that?" Tupac asked. "How do you keep going when the people closest to you try to destroy you?" 50 Cent's answer would be quoted in interviews and documentaries for decades to come. "You survive by understanding that loyalty isn't about blood," he said. "It's about character, and you keep going by turning your pain into power, your scars into strength." The crowd's response was unlike anything ever heard at the Oakland Coliseum. 38,000 people were on their feet, not cheering but showing respect for the raw courage it had taken to share such a personal and dangerous story. But Tupac wasn't finished with the conversation. "You said Supreme McGriff ordered this," Tupac said. "That name is familiar to me. He's connected to some dangerous people in New York." 50 nodded. "He runs one of the biggest drug operations in Queens, and he's got connections to record labels, to other artists, to people who can make careers or destroy them." "And you're not afraid to say his name in front of 38,000 witnesses?" Tupac asked. "I'm more afraid of staying silent," 50 replied. "Staying silent is what gets you killed. Speaking truth is what keeps you alive." Tupac's admiration for the young rapper was obvious to everyone watching. "You know what, 50 Cent?" Tupac said. "You just proved you're real in a way that most people in this industry never will. You faced death and came back stronger." He turned to address the crowd directly. "Y'all just heard something important," Tupac announced. "You heard what real survival sounds like. This young man got shot 9 times by his own family, and he's standing here telling his truth instead of hiding in fear." The crowd's response was thunderous, but it was a different kind of energy than typical concert applause. This was respect, recognition, understanding. But the most powerful moment was still coming. 50, Tupac said. "I want you to stay up here for the rest of this show. I want these people to see what a real survivor looks like." What followed was an hour of the most emotionally charged hip-hop performance ever captured on video. Tupac and 50 Cent performed together, with 50 adding verses to several songs that dealt with themes of betrayal, survival, and the cost of staying true to yourself in a world full of people who want to destroy you. The chemistry between them was immediate and obvious. Tupac's experienced wisdom combined with 50's raw hunger and survival instincts created something that transcended typical entertainment into genuine artistic collaboration. During Me Against the World, 50 added a verse about the loneliness of not being able to trust anyone, about sleeping with one eye open, about the psychological cost of surviving multiple assassination attempts. When they performed Keep Ya Head Up, 50 talked about his grandmother, about how she had stayed strong through his recovery, about how women in the community had to deal with the violence that men brought into their lives. But the most powerful collaboration came during an impromptu version of Dear Mama, where 50 talked about how his mother had struggled with addiction, how his grandmother had raised him, and how family bonds could be both the source of your greatest strength and your deepest wounds. The crowd was mesmerized, understanding that they were witnessing something that went beyond entertainment into real-life testimony and healing. The immediate impact of that night was visible in both men's careers. For 50 Cent, the exposure from performing with Tupac opened doors that had been closed to him after the shooting. Record label executives who had been afraid to work with him because of his connections to street violence began to see him as a survivor rather than a liability. Within months, 50 had signed deals that would launch him toward becoming one of the biggest names in hip-hop, always crediting that night with Tupac as the moment when he learned to turn his pain into artistic power. For Tupac, the encounter with 50 Cent reinforced his belief that his role in hip-hop was about more than just making music. It was about providing a platform for authentic voices, about giving survivors a chance to tell their stories. The performance also changed how the hip-hop community viewed the East Coast-West Coast conflict. Here was a West Coast legend and an East Coast newcomer, sharing a stage, sharing their pain, showing that the real enemy wasn't geographic rivalry, but the violence and betrayal that was destroying communities on both coasts. Music industry insiders began talking about that Oakland Coliseum performance as a turning point in hip-hop culture, the moment when authenticity became more important than regional affiliations. The bootleg recordings of that night became legendary among hip-hop collectors, not just for the musical performances but for the raw honesty and emotional courage that both men displayed. Today, 50 Cent often references that night as one of the most important moments in his career, the night when he learned that vulnerability could be strength and that sharing your truth could heal both yourself and your audience. The Oakland Coliseum includes the performance in their official history as one of the most significant cultural events ever held at the venue, a night when two artists from different worlds found common ground in survival and authentic expression. Hip-hop historians study the performance as an example of how the genre's most powerful moments come, not from manufactured drama but from real human connection and shared experience of struggle and triumph. 28 years later, the night when 50 Cent revealed the truth about his 9 bullets remains the most powerful example of how hip-hop can provide healing and transformation for both performers and audiences. The 38,000 people who witnessed that revelation became carriers of a different story about hip-hop culture, a story about courage, authenticity, survival, and the power of speaking truth even when that truth is dangerous. The stage that had been intended for entertainment became a platform for healing, showing that sometimes the most important performances are the ones where artists risk everything to share their most painful truths.